you've gotten to that point. Your aquarium you feel is doing really good, but you just don't have the color that you want. In my opinion, that number 7 is going to be the one thing that puts you into that next level. All right, welcome back to our channel for today. We're actually here in the shop. I thought this was a super cool spot to do our talk today because we've got Joey in the tank behind us. Just a cool backdrop, and it's kind of neat to see somebody inside of an aquarium, I think. Today I want to cover something that I think that it comes up in conversation a lot. And if anybody has ever done any kind of work with me over the years, I think it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart because it puts you as the hobbyist accountable. And that's coral coloration. A lot of time we have people come in to the shop specifically, or they write us in by email and they're like, I just can't seem to figure out how to get the color out of my corals that I need to. And today I want to start by saying this is like a beginner type video. I want to talk to pretty much everybody that's been in the hobby for 8 months or less, or even had a tank for 8 months or less. And the reason why I say that is because coloration is nothing more than one indicator of health. And it could be a really wide array of corals that we're talking about. Even some of your big polyp LPS, your stonies, your acropora, your monopora, your zoanthus. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's not a healthy coral, it's not going to be fully colored properly. We're going to talk about 2 scenarios total. One being you've been in the hobby for less than 8 months, or your tank's been set up for less than 8 months. And then we're going to talk about scenario 2, where you've been doing it for longer than that, or you've been set up for more than 8 months. And the reason why is it's a different approach altogether. So in scenario number 1, you're a relatively new hobbyist, or you've had a tank set up for less than 8 months. And I say 8 months because 6 months is a little too early to judge how well you've done taking care of your tank. A year is a really good marker that I use a lot for maturity. So 8 months puts you at that point where you've kind of figured some of the stuff out, and you're probably wanting to tinker around with a little bit more than just doing a water change and feeding your fish. There's 6 things that I pay really close attention to, and that's chemistry, flow, lighting, waste control, patience, and husbandry. I think we can probably forego the lighting segment. That may require an additional video on its own. I think that's probably too long for one video. On the flip side of the coin, we can talk about flow and waste export. I think they're very, very closely related. And I would say more important than probably the other variables. However, why I bring up these 6 topics is because this is the stuff that if I was a brand new hobbyist and I was listening to somebody who's been doing this for a long time, not only just been doing it for a long time, but been doing it a long time successfully, I would want to focus on how to do them all right. Flow and waste export, you gotta get the stuff out of the tank. So if you don't get the flow to the coral, they don't get to wash themselves of all the debris and the slime and all the stuff in the tank. 2, there's no movement of food past the corals because a lot of them are actually grabbing on a microscopic level all this stuff out of the water column. 3, you got to get the crud to your filtration. Whether you use roller mats, whether you use filter socks, whether you use filter floss, it doesn't really matter at all. It's got to go down the drain. Or in a case where you've got like a integrated sump design, like a innovative marine tank or something to that effect, it's got to go down the drain. So unless it's suspended, it's not going to happen. By delivering this flow, you're creating different zones, and you've got to have your high flow corals, your low flow corals, and then know where they go. So it's a lot to really take in. When you're a newer hobbyist, it feels like a daunting task. But as long as you focus on one topic at a time, and as long as you go really slow with it, so you know that the change that you made is making a positive impact a month down the road, you've done the right thing. Husbandry is a main topic for me. Why? Because in the first 8 months of your hobby, or in the first 8 months of a new tank setup, you're still establishing what your life looks like. Maybe you have a baby, maybe you work a lot more some weeks, maybe you work a lot less some weeks, maybe you've got all the time in the world and all you want to do is tinker on your tank. These husbandry factors play a big role in your success. So that path in the first 8 months of time allows you to focus in on what works with your lifestyle, as well as the type of aquarium you're trying to keep. Because nobody is the same as the next person. And maybe this gal over here wants to have a softy tank with minimal flow and maybe a seahorse or something like that. And then over here is a super high performing SPS Reef tank full of tenuous and speciosa. Two completely different people. And that lifestyle has to support that decision. In the first 8 months of time, you're establishing that regimen. And are you doing it weekly? Are you doing it bi-weekly? How much are you doing? How often do you clean the glass? How often are you cleaning your filter floss, your filter pad? Those are all things that have to be established in a very early point. So going back to the purpose of this video, you gotta dial this stuff in first before you're gonna worry about coral coloration. I mean, that's something that I can't even nearly express enough. If you're worried about coral color, then you're past that point. You already do flow right. You already do lighting right. You already know your maintenance habits. You're already a patient person and you know that it's not gonna result in success in a week. So I touched a little bit on timing and how long you should be waiting for some sort of result. Let's assume you made one change. I'm gonna pick lights. Change your lighting percentage by 10%. How long should you wait before you realize that it's a successful change? In my mind, it's a month. I say 10 days. Well, you've heard me say 10 days in other videos. 10 days, you're gonna know if you made a bad decision. In a month, you're gonna know if you made a good decision. So as long as you wait a month, you're gonna use a couple key indicators. Your fluffy corals are still fluffy. Your stony corals are getting either more growth on the tips or better polyp extension. And your zoanthids are still full with an intact skirt with that nice alternating pattern. If those things are not happening, then it wasn't a good choice. And again, there's a lot of other factors, but as long as you make one change at a time and you go back 1 month, there's a pretty good chance that after that period of time, you know if you can make another bump to your lights. So that was only talking about lights. If it's flow, same thing. Within the next day, you'll probably know whether or not it was too much. But again, give it a month before you make another change, because what if that's the mark that you want to be at and you've just blown by it with another change? If you haven't realized by now, I'm talking about patience is something that needs to be your number one priority. Another thing that I can say, if you like to tinker, each and every change to your equipment should require a period of pause and reevaluate also. So if you plan on ever traveling and having a reef tank, set up an auto feeder. Do it during normal operation. Do it on a very middle of the week type day where there's nothing spectacular about it, and then just let it ride for the next month before you go on vacation, because now you know how frequently you need to fill it, what type of food works in it, how often it needs to run, how many rotations of the barrel it needs to have. Like, this is a very intricate hobby and we can make a lot of stupid mistakes, and 99% of the time, if the tank doesn't do good, it's because we did something to influence that. Okay, so let's move on to scenario number 2. Let's say that you have already exceeded 8 months in the hobby, or your tank has been set up for 8 months. I think you've kind of figured out all those things that I've been talking about. You know, your schedule is good, you've got good coral growth, which is probably number one indicator. You're not dealing with algae. Everybody that comes to your house goes, wow, that's amazing, including hobbyists. Because you don't want the general public giving you feedback. You want a hobbyist who's gonna grill your tank and say, I see an aptasia. you've gotten to that point and your aquarium you feel is doing really good, but you just don't have the color that you want. This is at that point where you're ready to take the next step. So now we go back to those same 6 principles: lighting, flow, filtration, waste export, patience, husbandry. Now let's talk about the 7th. In my opinion, that number 7 is going to be the one thing that puts you into that next level. And next level is food. So this has to be nutrient input. So no different from an athlete. An athlete has to take in serious calories, the right calories, but it's all controlled. And everything has to be in moderation. So this is no different with your aquarium. But now, since you're past that 8-month point, maybe you're past the year point and you're doing exceptionally well, you have the bio to support whatever you throw at it. So your rock has the best biodiversity, your sand is just rock solid, it has everything it needs in it, your corals do well. It's at this point where we start to throw more food of different varieties at the coral, because that's what's going to get these corals into that big fluffy polyp form. And you've carried yourself all along through this journey, whether it's with brown corals or pale corals. You've seen them at their worst and you've seen them maybe at their best along the way. But now it's time for you to say, I really want the best of the best. It is food. And I think Vic drives this home a million times every video. He loves to feed his tank. And his corals look amazing. But it is literally just for that reason. It's high performance. He's got his light dialed in. His bio can take care of any kind of incoming organic that he puts in there. So little bits at a time, wait a month, increase the volume. Little bits at a time, wait a month, increase the volume. Maybe add another type of food that you weren't feeding before. It really genuinely is the key to your success. If you can figure out how to put as much food in the tank that it can possibly handle organically, then your corals are without a doubt going to be successful, because you've already figured out all of the fundamentals, that foundation that you built as an early hobbyist of not throwing everything at it initially and then waiting until later to fine tune those details. That food is going to be the number one, 110%. And this is nothing revolutionary, but it's the process that matters. So if you figured out how to create those regimens at an early age, if you figured out how to do all those things, you already know that it fits your lifestyle. Now you take one little change and you modify it, and that's what's going to get you to that next level. And that goes with lighting too, because that could be categorized as food because they're photosynthetic animals. You're not going to run a really super high bright light early on, but when you start feeding heavy and when you start cranking those lights up is when things change for the better. Things like controllers. I don't like to push that at an early part in the hobby because it adds another variable of complexity. If you wait until you're at that point where you're ready to supercharge your reef, that's when you put it on, but it has to be out of necessity, like I said, not want. So necessity means that you're looking to create a process in which you better your day-to-days. So that's a really good point for somebody who's looking to build a brand new reef tank. And my suggestion, I would wait until you already know that this is a hobby for you and you already know how to take care of your aquarium. Proactively build it so that you've got compartmentalization underneath your stand, or you've got a separate piece of furniture where you put all your gadgets and gizmos, but then you add those systematically one at a time afterwards, because it increases the complexity to your already complex operation. But they all are very beneficial because they can provide input for monitoring pH or alkalinity or any of those parameters that they test for. But it also gives you that ability to create a redundancy which you didn't have before. but because you already did it without it, you understand and you feel the pain of having those fundamentals in place before you really supercharge your reef. So I think that there's a lot to be said about waiting and being patient when it comes to equipment as well, because all the good equipment, all the right fundamental knowledge, all the right amount of trial and error after that 8-month period it's going to make you a long-term successful hobbyist. And take this from somebody who's been doing it for a long time. I've been through my phases where I didn't want a reef tank, but I still love the hobby. It's never become it's never not been a passion of mine. And still to this day, I get excited about coral just like I did on day one. So preserve that, and I think that it's something that will allow you to be successful all the way through without so many pain points, as long as everything is systematic. And once you know it's for you, go for it. I mean, I've seen some of the nicest reef tanks out of a beginner hobbyist or a young hobbyist, but it's kind of a bummer because they don't stick with it. You know, there's a couple guys on the forums that have been doing it for a long time, and you see they've gone through all those pains, but they know now what their regimen has become. And that's what it is. That's the basis of what's going to allow you to keep pushing forward in the hobby or give up. So find your groove. You know, we're going to call this video coral coloration, but really it's about reef fundamentals. And I honestly think if you can get the basics down first, everything follows suit afterwards. All right, so if you like this kind of content and you want to keep getting our notifications, make sure you hit the bell. You gotta get our notifications when our new videos go up. Please like and subscribe. Make sure you leave comments in the comment section so we know what to do for you next. And we're gonna be at Reefapalooza, New York, 22nd and 23rd. That's only a couple weeks away. If you haven't got your tickets yet, make sure you check it out and come see us. It's gonna be a heck of a party.